I've heard a rumor. My name is Peter Bergson. I don't know what to add to what you already said. Basically, well, I'm retired now, but I'm a full-time volunteer at an organization called Oakwood Connections, which my wife and I started in '75 as a preschool kindergarten, applying the basic principles that I had learned as a creative process consultant, teaching creative problem-solving skills to business people, and said, this is remedial, why aren't we doing this with young folks? And that led to the creation of this program for 3 to 5-year-olds. And then once they got too big for the furniture, the question was, what happens to them now? And that's when we learned about the work of a man named John Holt. Some of you may be familiar with his work. He had just started a national publication called Growing Without Schooling to help families who wanted to, as he put it, get out of a burning building, do so. And so from that point on, I became involved in the homeschooling community, which, if you're picturing religious conservatives, you got to change that picture. John used the term unschooling rather than homeschooling. It's about self-directed, self-determined learning, not about hiding out from the real world. So that's what I did for 35, 40 years. And if your introduction's as long as mine was, we'll say thank you and good night. Sorry.
My name is Monica Islam. I'm married to Justin, actually, coming up on our 4th year. I'm an attorney by profession, and I get to listen to a lot of this at home and try to be a sounding board. I am very much more leaning towards the more traditional model of education, and so it's always interesting for me to throw curveballs at them and see what he comes up with.
Hi, I'm JP Dunphy. I actually grew up with these two, Brian and Justin, and I'm like any of you here, I'm an actor by my main thing, but also in my spare time I'm also a singer, songwriter, amateur architect. I've built tiny houses in Colorado, briefly in the Air Force, and yeah, I'm eccentric. But,
my name is Kyle Longacre, and I'm an assistant principal at Souderton High School. I'll be the first of the 5 Souderton contingent that we have here.
Excellent.
And I've been there for, I started in 9th grade, been there for about 4 years. And previously I was at Quakertown High School as an assistant principal and then taught for 12 years. I worked with Center for Greater Philadelphia and the Philadelphia Partnership Program for quite a few of those years. And we were partnered with University City High School and some garden projects that were going on down there as well. So I appreciate what you're saying about putting the garden and the farm into it. And I was a farm boy as well. I grew up on a farm up in Valley, Pennsylvania. So.
Can I just say, I'm glad I had no idea of that before I started talking.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you.
I'm Sam Verano, and I'm principal of that high school. And I like corn.
Thank you very much.
Plenty of that tonight.
Corn whiskey. I have a dozen years of corn, but I get them.
I'm Matt Fingerman. I work actually at Bank of New York Mellon, right in this building. But I was previously a core member at Teach for America.
I'm Terry Gilbert. I'm trained as an attorney. I have a practice with entrepreneurial business clients, angel investors, venture capitalists. But I spend a lot of my time dealing with microfinance and women in third world countries, trying to create mostly uneducated, illiterate women interested in earning money so that they can feed their children, clothe their children, give their children an education, and some health care. My only relationship to education is the one I had that I gave my daughter that I'm still supporting through my tax dollars, but always interested in
Do you, I hear microfinance and I hear women in third world countries. Do you work in Bangladesh?
I have not personally been in Bangladesh, but we do, I'm involved in an organization, an international organization who has put banks in countries all over the world,
Sure.
30, 40 banks. A lot in South America and Asia and in India and in Africa, but whether we have a particular one in Bangladesh, we only work, and you would know why this is important, we only work in countries where we can identify a responsible NGO on the ground who understands what's going on. Otherwise, we find another place
Gotcha.
to invest.
Cool. Thank you.
My name is Mary Ellen Russo. I'm Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment in the Souderton Area School District. And Justin, I'm going to invite you to come see a school, a public school system that is doing exactly what you say no one is doing. So I'm going to leave you our card and
Yeah,
invite you
please
to
do.
see what public education can be.
It's great. Absolutely.
My name is Mark James, and I'm a math teacher at, wait for it, Souderton and have been for 14 years. I spent several years teaching middle school, but I've been teaching the last 8 or so in high school. And it gets better, I'm also the president of our local teachers union. So I have that perspective. And I'm an instructional coach that's here in a new position. I teach one class per day, and then spend the remainder of my day working with 6th through 8th grade math teachers. Construct a kind of classroom that isn't sit down, shut up, and listen to meetings.
It's fantastic.
I'm the last of the Souderton contingency. I'm Gail Ryan. I'm an elementary principal in Souderton. I've been a teacher there, principal, which I think is the best job going because you get to interface with kids, teachers, and really make a difference.
Sure. Well, great.
So I'll add an elementary school to that list. You can
Yeah.
drop in there and see the exciting things that are happening.
Well, I mean, I'm deliriously happy that you all made it. I really appreciate it. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. I mean,
I'd love to.
Yeah, please.
Because I think we can have a pretty robust conversation. They know I'm pretty verbose. I'll be succinct. Partially because I can squeeze a lot of words into a short amount of time. But I think this sounds like this could be a really rich conversation. And I think what I feel like to me, of all the remarks that you made, it feels to me as if the starting point for you in terms of your viewpoint or your ideology on this is the statement you made that said we all know our schools are failing. And I don't know that everyone in this room would agree with that statement. I think we could agree with the statement that there are many schools for many reasons that are struggling. But to categorically paint with a broad brush and say our public schools are failing, to me, I'm not on board with that statement. So I think we need to agree to disagree and then have a discussion afterward, or agree to temporarily suspend the notion that all of our schools are failing.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, I didn't mean to give the impression that all of our schools necessarily are failing per se. I think public education generally in this country is falling short of what it should be. I mean, there are goals that are not being met. And I think there's a lot of interference from people who aren't really willing to really look critically at all aspects of the model. So in other words, not just the nitty-gritty, you know, do we have smart boards everywhere, and do our teachers know the pedagogy or our standards right? But like, really, what are we doing structurally? And I'm glad you guys are all here because, you know, it's nice to hear that there's at least one school where that's, or sorry, I don't want to say at least one. It's glad to see that there's more than I had expected. I think really, things definitely are changing. Progressive models of education are gaining a lot more traction, especially recently, with the cost struggles that we've had and the way education reform has sort of been in the national consciousness. So, yeah, go
I
ahead.
disagree with that. Just like this gentleman over here, John Holt was writing in the 70s about progressive education. It's not new. It's not.
Sure.
It's not a new idea. It's not.
Oh, naturally.
So
Yes. I mean, what I meant to say is that it's gaining traction now. Is that right?
It had a lot of traction in the 70s.
Yeah. Well, I sang. I don't know.
Well, I think too, Justin, when you made the comparison, or you contrasted where we are versus South Korea or Finland or Singapore or any number of nations who we are continually compared to for our PISA scores and things like that. When you say we as a nation, our public schools are struggling, there's one key point that very few people point out. Every other country that we point to that's getting results that they are happy with, education, public education is well, first of all, they're much smaller, and it's,
Yeah.
Finland is like, what, the size of Massachusetts or something. In terms of the scale, they fund it federally, they support it federally, and everything is standardized federally. And our nation is built on this idea that the states get to control, and obviously that's changing under Race to the Top and Common Core. But, I mean, I just think it's just not, it's never going to be a fair comparison because of all the ways
Absolutely.
that the United
No, I
States is different. And there are, well, to quote Diane Ravitch, who may or may not be someone who's popular to hear about, we don't really, what she has said, and I think she's got real street cred based on her experience working for the Department of Education under Bush and Clinton, and has been at both sides. She's not an apolitical person. She's all about what's right and wrong with the attacks on education and the corporate reform movement. But she said it very succinctly, and I think quite accurately. When you talk about inner city schools, I mean, if your entire perspective on where we are in education is based on urban education, I think I'd be a lot more on board with you in terms of we've got to try something because the system's broken. Let's blow it up and start over. But to that point, she said we don't have an education problem in this country, we have a poverty problem in this country. And I think that's the root of the system. The way that we fund education, and I know you're going to say next, you're next going to say, well, we can't throw money at it because
No, that's not what
Mark Zuckerberg gave $1 million or something.
Yeah, no, that's not
Well,
what that's what our,
well, that's what a lot of people go to.
sure, yeah.
So it's more complex than just throwing more money, because throwing money at the schools isn't throwing money at those kids in their homes when there's one parent and not breakfast and things like that. So I'll stop. I don't want to